Welcome back to CX Unplugged, the Customer Data mini-series. My name is Susan Ramrup, and I am the Customer Marketing Manager for SAP Customer Data Solutions. On our last episode, we talked about third-party cookies and what it really means for your marketing on your brand. Helping me drive today's conversation is Sally Eves, Chair of Cyber Trust and Senior Policy Advisor for the Global Foundation of Cyber Studies. Welcome, Sally.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Great to join you today.
Thank you. So, Sally, in our last episode, we touched upon two important things that are needed in order to provide that great customer experience. Number one being data, which is essentially that first party or zero data. And second thing is the consent that you actually need to use that data. We determined that without these two things, you can't really create that great customer experience that everyone expects today. So while we're on this topic of great customer experience, I wanted to have a bit of story time with you. And so we can talk about when our data has been misused.
Absolutely. No, great example. Great question.
So for me, I know I love to shop, but I also love shopping where I can shop and personalize and customize any of the items that I have. So there was this one time that I went into a store to get custom shoes. I filled out my profile with my name, my gender, my birthday, all of that information that was needed. And then a week later, when it was actually my birthday, I got an email that it was addressed to Mr. Ramroop. And I was actually getting offers that are male related. So at this point, I'm like, maybe I filled out my profile wrong or something auto-corrected on my phone. And when I went back in to actually check, everything was filled out correctly. So for me, this was super frustrating that I actually took the time to give all of my data, but this brand just wasn't using it properly.
Absolutely. Great example there, definitely. And you remember those, don't you? It's those experiences that you can remember the most, definitely.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of when it's happened to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Probably both ends of the spectrum as well. So for me, we talk about omni-channel a lot, don't we? And that's not the same as multi-channel. We use them interchangeably. And for me, you fill out a form on a website, for example, you put your details in there, or you might join from like a Twitter contact. And then you expect that information to then travel with you to the next stage of that journey, because there's so many touch points today, isn't there? And you need them to be seamless. But I've had a few occasions lately where I've given that data and then it's been forgotten or partially remembered, and you kept getting asked for that same information again. And then you wonder where the rest of that data has gone to and what it's been used for example. It creates lots of friction along the way when you experience that. And equally, another example, and I had this literally this morning, was, when you're ringing through like a call center environment, for example, and you have that automated system and you have the numbering, and you're like 5 in the queue, 4 in the queue, 3, etc. Got all the way through 25 minutes later. And at the very end, it rang out and nothing happened. And in the end, you disconnected the call. I tried again and actually was disconnected after going through that entire process. When you experience something like that, are you really likely to go back after experiencing that? So yeah, you have to make sure things are seamless and you reduce those points of friction along the way. It's hugely important.
Very important. And for everybody that's watching at home, feel free to drop your stories in the chat. We'd love to hear some of the examples that you guys have had. But yeah, so as we mentioned on our episode last week, our series is twofold. So in the first episode, we talked about the issues at hand. And then in this episode, which is our second one, we'd like to actually showcase how our solutions can actually make things easier for you to collect that data and learn how to use it properly. So Sally, why don't you go ahead and introduce who we have backstage while I go figure out how we can show everyone at home how to bring this to life.
Absolutely, that'd be my pleasure. So backstage, who'll be joining us soon, is Alex Lipap, who is SAP Customer Experience Suite Senior Architect. And on the stage with me right now, it's a pleasure to introduce John Thompson, who's Global GTM SAP Customer Data Solutions at SAP. Welcome, John.
Hi, Sally. Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me back. And I was really interested listening to what you and Susan were just talking about. And I'm sure everybody's got loads of those anecdotes that we can all talk about, right? Happens all the time, unfortunately, still.
Absolutely. We've all been there, haven't we? And again, they're the sort of things that remember, aren't they? Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'd love to kind of drill into how we address that. So how we turn that the other way around and the positive stories of what we can do to enable experience. So from your point of view, with the solutions you're working with, how can we make it easier? Now, how can we remove those barriers to enable customers to really identify themselves and register more seamlessly, for example?
Well, I think you've touched on a couple of the key themes there, right, in your question already. making it easy, right? That's what our solutions aim to do. Most of us are human, right? So we're all interacting with brands through, you called it omni-channel, but it could also be multi-channel, right? But it doesn't really matter whether it's multi or omni-channel. We're all interacting with brands and organizations, and we're all human, and we all want it to be as easy as possible, right? So our solutions do that. They make it as easy as possible, removing all those barriers, removing as much friction as possible for you as a consumer or an end user to actually get in to do business with the customer, with the organization, with the brand. I liken it to our identity solution, the CIAM solution, Customer Identity and Access Management. I liken it to being the front door to your business, right? And if you don't have a front door, customers can't get in, can't do business with you. And if you make that front door as difficult as possible to open, they're going to go next door where the door's wide open and as easy as possible to get in, right? And I think that's what we do with our solution, make it really easy for customers to get in and do business with you.
Absolutely. And it's kind of meeting customers wherever they are, isn't it? Absolutely. Across all these different things, and social commerce communities, buy now, pay later. There's so many different things that are integrating together. And I think we're seeing expectations changing and rising alongside the behavior changes we've seen across the pandemic as well.
Definitely. I 100% agree with you what you're saying there. One of the key things we always hear, and I'm sure you've heard it, I'd say a million times as well, data silos, right? And what you and Susan were both talking about, the word came into my head. I was thinking, oh, these are data silos. These companies are still thinking in data silos, and probably also in business process, right? And so what happens is not only is the data silo, so you'd not recognize the different touch points that you have with that brand, but also there's a business process being put in place which isn't really conducive to a good customer experience or to any sort of customer experience, right? Because somebody at the business has decided you need to do this in order to get this result, right? But the customer doesn't want to do it. And that's where that friction starts to really start to increase and make life difficult for all of us as consumers. Yeah.
Absolutely. There was some research that came out very recently, actually, and it was talking about brand love. And it was effectively saying, just one bad experience like this, the percentages were up in the kind of 80s and 90s about going to that next door, to use your example, not going to the front door, going to the next door if you just have one of those. So it's hugely, hugely important. You need that consistency, that connection, the security, and that friction free, as we've been talking about a lot already. I couldn't agree more. So from your perspective, what can we do to better facilitate this for any type of customer experience?
Well, again, I think in your introductions and what Susan and yourself just mentioned, I think you've really touched on the key themes, right? So it's again, it's making it easy as possible to get in, and we said, I think on the last episode, in my opinion, there are two things you need for any sort of customer experience, and if you don't have both of them, then you don't have a customer experience. One is data, and the other is the consent or the permission to use that data, right? You need both of them in order to make any sort of customer experience. And then on top of that, there's things about, we say consent, but also making it transparent for the end customer. And I heard this in your anecdote as well. You were saying, what's happened to my data? Where's the rest of that data? It's disappeared somewhere. It's in Nirvana somewhere, right? Does that foster trust with you as a consumer for that brand? And that's what we need to do. We need to create trust. And the way to create trust, there are a few ways, of course, but the way we create trust is through enabling and facilitating transparency and control. Two key topics: transparency from an organization perspective for their customers, for the end consumers, to actually see and know and understand what is that organization doing with my data? What data do they have? Is it transparent and clear to me? And what are they doing with it? And if you do that, and if as an organization, if you are transparent and you do use the data in the way you say you're going to use the data, and you keep your brand promise, then that's the way to start fostering trust, right? And building that trust with your consumers. And the next aspect, one that I think is also really important about is control, right? To give control over the data to your end consumers, to your customers. And you need to have solutions which have that functionality in place, right, to make it transparent. But that's one side of it. The other side is the control piece. And you need to have the control mechanisms in place for your customers to control the data. And what I mean by that is if they need to change it, if you've changed email address, or if you've moved house and you want to change your delivery address, or you've got a new mobile phone number, or you don't want that newsletter about the newest flat screen TV because you bought it, then you should be able to go in and easily change that sort of data, your preferences, and you update your profile and things like that. That's what companies need to do, and that's what our solutions facilitate.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think there's an awful lot of use of like integration behind the scenes there as well, and
Definitely.
emergent technologies as well, really adding that intelligence to the enterprise that can be so key for embedding trust, as you were talking about there. And one positive example of that, and I think a lot of embedded analytical AI was involved in this, but I care passionately about a lot of social impact causes. And one brand that I was interacting with along one of these journeys, at the end of it, they linked it to some of my passions outside of that. And there was a way to, for example, donate towards something at the end. And it was truly connected and cared about the purpose as well. So for me, that's another thing I always look for, is that brand purpose. So it can be done really well. So I think what you're saying there is a great enabler for that.
Yeah, good examples as well. Really interesting.
Nice. That was a great conversation, guys. So I found Alex backstage, and he's actually going to show us how our solutions can help. But before we jump to that, I'd actually like to ask everyone out there, what really makes you guys trust a brand? What is it that makes you want to fill out the information when you are making a purchase? So go ahead and drop those comments while we throw it over to Alex.
Thank you, Susan and Sally. That was really, really interesting. And as usual, very colorful, thanks to John. And now I'm going to show you a couple of things as well. The first thing I want to show you is how seamless the onboarding experience can be. Let's say I find an ad on Facebook for a coffee brand I know and love because I go to this store often. I get to the site and think, hey, I'm almost out. Let's get some pods to be delivered. I accept the cookie and start the onboarding experience. I select Twitter to log in, but could have used a selection of passwordless options like magic links. The site prompts me for the minimum data, an email, and gives me the choice to approve several personalization options. Based on my past store purchases, the site prompts me with a question about my coffee habits. I respond and instantly get a personalized experience. I can now go and purchase the recommended option, allowing me to discover a new flavor. No need for third-party data, just asking the right questions at the right time. Now, let's see how marketing operations can bring data from all channels to facilitate the best user experience. Let's pretend I'm a marketer and I've just got news that operations added a new source of data to my customer data platform, e-receipts. I just need to go to my source applications and finalize the configuration. I select the in-store offline data one and just need to adjust a few settings for the e-receipts data source. I put in the file name I was given and proceed to map the incoming data. Drag in and dropping, easy peasy, allowing me to choose which data gets in and where. Almost done with the profile, and now I can map that event information to the orders activity that are going to represent the behavior, basically, of my customers. Once done, I could schedule it to run automatically, but let's test it first. Now that it's done, let's view the results with my favorite customer, Peter. I gathered his offline spending habits, which I can leverage to ask him the right questions to confirm his preferences, as we saw in the first part of this demo. As a regular customer, he is also assigned to the highest tier of my VIP segment. I can now leverage his first and second party data to get him the best experience, not need to stalk him all over the internet. That's it for me. Back to you, Sally.
Thank you, Alex. That was a great demonstration and a great customer there with Peter, I would add as well. Fantastic. And John, if I bring you back in at this point as well, I'd love to ask you one final question. So from your perspective, everything we've talked about today, and obviously Alex's great demo as well, what do you think the most important thing is for people to take away from our session?
It's a very good question, because there's lots of important things, and I'd like everybody to take everything away, of course. The most important thing, I'm going to try and surmise it with the 4 words that I like to use. Identity and consent. They're not the 2 actually. Not 2 of the 4. What I'm going to say is, you need data and you need consent for customer experience, and the other 2 words are transparency and control. I think those are the most important things. That's how you build trust, and that's how you build delightful customer experiences.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Great way to end that as well. Again, I'll do a little summary as well of that. And I'll totally recap what you said there about data, consent, trust, visibility, and control. I think those are the words that came out for me along all of this as well. I think the other thing that's really striking me through our conversation today as well, it's, you know, customer behaviors have changed, but also expectations have changed for us all as well over this time, I think. I also think brand loyalty, you know, it's not just a question about product or service or price for that matter. I think it's one about the experience that we receive and its quality and its relevancy, also its transparency as well, and also the brand values and the purpose as well. The example I gave about that social impact one, for example, I think that's super important for me as well. And also the power of technology underpinning all of this, you know, the integration that helps make things possible, the use of things like conversational AI, analytical AI, etc. as well. So really unleashing the power of that data. So you're moving from volume to true data value. And for me, I think that's really how we get experiences that are personalized for us all, and their preferences aware as well. And they're very contextual to what we really, really care about. And they're connected and they're seamless and then innovative. So fantastic learnings, I think, from the session today. And at this point, I think I'll take it back to Susan.
Well, thank you guys. That was amazing. And thank you all at home for attending and joining us in this conversation. I hope we were able to show you how easy it can be for you to build that trust with your customers and give them that experience they want and expect by having the right solutions in place. Join us for our next episode on October 14th as we discuss first-party data again and the rights to use that data with data privacy intertwined in it. Thank you all. And as always, if you have a pressing topic or would like to be on the show, feel free to send us an email at CXUnplugged@sap.com. Bye for now.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.